I want to thank Jessica for returning to us. Jessica has been here before. She was here in March of 2021, and she was just recently an amazing speaker at the Agile conference. So maybe she'll talk a little bit about that. Jessica's back to share some of her wonderful learnings with us. Jessica, thank you for coming. I'm going to turn the floor over to you.
Great. Thank you so much. So I want to second what was just said. Do please turn on your video if you feel comfortable doing so. We're also going to have some in-presentation surveys. So if you want to go ahead and pull that survey site up now, that'll just get you ahead of the game. In fact, I'll even give you a QR code for it. Give me just a second. There's the QR code if you so desire. And my goal for you tonight is to walk away with one technique you can try to improve your time management. That's my objective. Agile 2022 was fantastic. I did see Elias in there, so good to see you again here. And I think I also saw scrum.org there, if I'm not mistaken. It was a great conference. I spoke there about creating boundaries, and I also spoke there about assertive communication. So my niche space tends to be in the communication space, but I come from a long line of project management into Scrum, into Agile coaching. And so today what I do the most is training and coaching. Are there any questions for me about me that will help you feel more comfortable hearing from me today?
I'll ask quickly, Jessica, what makes you the authority on time management over the rest of us? Because we need to know how you get there.
Yeah, well, I wouldn't say I'm the authority, but I certainly have practiced it. And what I'll be bringing to you is really a conglomeration of some stuff that I've learned over the course of my many years. And more than I want to tell you. The stuff that I use in my day-to-day life and in my business to help me stay focused and on time, and the stuff that I teach Scrum teams and Kanban teams and leadership groups to do to balance out so we don't deal with burnout. Really, burnout's one of the big risks in time management. So this is really a coming together of information I've learned over time is what you're going to get tonight.
Awesome. I love it. Can't wait. I need some of it, all of it, most of it.
Cool. Is everyone ready to dig in?
Yes.
Yeah. Awesome. All right. So principle number one thing at a time. Task switching can cost you 23 minutes every time you switch. So for example, if you are working on a project in your work and somebody comes up to you and interrupts you about a project they're working on, and it has nothing to do with your project, you'll lose 23 minutes on average getting into their context, and then lose another 23 minutes getting back into your context. So what we want to do is focus on one thing at a time. Kanban does this by saying, get the number one priority all the way across the board. Scrum does this by saying, get the number one priority all the way across the board. So we see that already in Agile spaces, and we're going to focus on one thing at a time. So we're going to do an activity. For this activity, you will need a piece of paper and a pen or a pencil and a timer, a stopwatch will do. On your phone, on the computer, it doesn't matter. Piece of paper and a pen. Next thing I want you to do is create 3 columns. The top of the columns, just across your page, 3 columns, numbers, letters, and Roman numerals is what you're after. Numbers, letters, Roman numerals. You're going to go across your columns, filling them in. So you're going to, this is the instructions, don't start yet. Start your timer or stopwatch or whatever. And then starting with the number 3, fill in your rows. So you'll fill in 3C, the Roman numeral 3. And then when you're done, when you get to the 15th Roman numeral, you're going to stop and write down your time. All right, even see somebody going, oh, wait, I made a couple mistakes. Awesome. All right, we're going to do this exercise again with a subtle change. Next round, get another piece of paper, or you can use the back side of that one or the other bottom half of that one, whatever you want to do. Create 3 columns, label them numbers, letters, Roman numerals. This time, you're going to go down. You're going to fill in each column before you move on to the next column. And here's the instructions. When you get to the 15th number, write down your time for each column, write down your time and restart your timer. So when you get to the 15th number, you're going to write down whatever time is on your timer. When you get to the 15th letter, write down the time for that amount. And when you get to the 15th Roman numeral, write down your time for that and stop your timer. And then add all those 3 times together. Start whenever you're ready. All right. So here's the question. Did everybody get faster? Did anybody get slower? All right. Everybody move faster, probably. If your customer wanted numbers, they were looking for your numbers to be delivered, which round would they have been happier in? First round?
Second round, definitely.
Second.
Yeah, second round. Yep. So second round numbers, they would have gotten it faster. If your customer wanted Roman numerals, which round?
Second.
Second round, it was still faster. This is the benefit of narrowing your focus. If you're trying to do 3 things at once, what's really happening in your brain is you're doing constant context shifting. People who multitask are really doing fast context shifting, not actually multitasking. Okay, so this is principle number 1, one thing at a time. All right, what questions or thoughts do you have around this principle?
I didn't read your instruction the first time. I did it in a row. That's what.
Instructions matter. Okay. Always read the requirements.
Yes.
That could be a
Very
different
good.
problem, right?
Yeah.
Yes.
No, I think I've seen this before. When you got to the second round, it definitely sounded familiar, but it's a strong example of how focus matters. I think you did a great job with that.
Great. This exercise did not come from me. I first interacted with this exercise when I took a workshop with Ken Rubin, who wrote Essential Scrum. So there's my reference point for this particular activity. Doesn't belong to me.
So I had some input.
Yeah.
Okay. So much of the context switching happens when a colleague or someone comes to you. I want this. You can't avoid some things because it's time bound and all that. And yes, I agree with you that avoiding context switching, if you're working on something, you can block out, but you can't block out everybody.
Well, I'm gonna just challenge the word can't. What we really do is choose not to block out everybody. And that choice needs to be conscious instead of because I believe I can't. Sometimes we choose not to block out, say, the CEO of the company because you don't want to get fired, or because you believe they hold more power than you, or but get real honest with yourself. You can, and you're not willing to face the perceived consequences. So that is my other piece of sort of side advice there. Boundaries do matter, and we're going to talk some more about that as we go along.
Excuse me, but would you not agree that the word can't is conditional based upon the information you have at that moment in time? You have to frame it based upon that moment in time?
All right, so I want to tell you a bias I have.
Okay,
so
fine.
I have a bias towards choice. I really believe that everybody can choose at any given time what to do. Now, we might feel like we don't have choice, and so we feel like we have to, or we can, or we can't not. That can sometimes come up. And Even if in the moment you choose to respond to, and I have to do this, I encourage you to start reflecting on what causes you to make the have to choice in your head. So I have a bias towards choice. I'm a really frustrating person to manage as a result. Right. So for managers who are bought into the hierarchy and the power structure, I become a very frustrating person to manage because I believe it's all choice.
Thank you for your feedback. Appreciate it.
Yeah. Okay. Are we ready for principle number 2? All right. Principle number 2, narrow your focus. Anybody have a cat? Yeah. Anybody ever seen them do the laser close butt wiggle? That's what we mean. We want you to narrow your focus tight on the thing you're pouncing. All right. So this is the idea. Here's some ways to narrow your focus. One of the things that happens in our brain is we have like this list of 500 things we need to do, and your brain keeps telling you about them. So a good way to get that out of the way is to write it down. As soon as a thing pops in your head that might distract you from the highest priority thing you need to be working on, write it down. This is one style. This comes from bullet journaling. So you can learn more about bullet journaling from the bullet journal system. I also have a whole talk on bullet journaling. If anybody wants to geek out about it, I'm happy to do so. But the idea here is you just write everything in bullets each day. Here we have sort of a legend about what all of these mean. So the dots are tasks, the circles are events, and the dashes are just notes. It's not to forget. You can mix and match them. You can, indent things under. You can put more than one thing next to them. And you can also add some signifiers. So an asterisk would indicate priority, an exclamation point would indicate inspiration, or whatever you want to make it. If you go down the rabbit hole of bullet journaling, you will find a tremendous number of people use this in a much more artistic way than this. I did this for a solid year. I did bullet journaling, and I found that it became an expression of art for me instead of just a task list. So know that there's also, if you're a real creative person, this can be a fun place to make task lists more interesting. My husband prefers lists on sticky notes. I have lots of sticky notes happening back here for the same reason. Now that I work for myself and I don't have to keep track of quite as many things, I find sticky notes are sufficient. So you do you, but find a way to get it out of your head and onto a piece of paper. Another example that comes directly from our work is the Kanban process. You can make your own personal Kanban board. The key is to limit your WIP limit, right? You need a WIP limit of 1. You are only one person. You can only do one thing at a time. So don't fight your WIP limit. You can only do one thing at a time. That's the narrowing the focus part. Thank you, Brian, for defining that. If you're not sure what to focus on, you can use the Eisenhower matrix as a really useful tool for this. So urgent means requiring immediate attention, and important means having relevant and crucial value. That's really what we're looking for. You get to define what those mean for your personal backlog. If you're working on a team, that means you all have to have a definition of what urgent and important mean, and you have to agree to that definition. It can be part of your working agreements. If you have a boss who's prone to tell you things at the last minute or look like there's a fire, you can have this conversation with them. Hey, when is something really urgent? When is something really important? What changes something from non-urgent to urgent for you? Which could help you prioritize in the face of an excitable leadership. You can do this at home too. This what's urgent, what's important question. Building's on fire, urgent and important. Your child is bleeding, probably urgent and important, right? Those are going to be in the urgent and important zone. The oven has finished preheating. That's probably not urgent, but might be important. right? So the idea here is that if it's urgent and important, you do that first. If it's important and not urgent, you schedule it. If it's urgent and not important, you delegate it. And if it's neither important or urgent, don't do it. I have one caveat to this. Time, we're going to get to breaks in a little bit, how important it is to take breaks. Sometimes the don't do this area holds the stuff you do when you're in breaks. Like I'm a crocheter, for example. It's not really urgent or important, but it does bring me joy. And so it's in my don't do this bucket. It gets prioritized low, but when I take a break, it's the thing I go do. Right? Maybe for some of you, it's feeding a hummingbird. Right? So we'll talk more about that as we get down to that. What questions do you have about this narrow your focus principle?
Where does the name come from? Was it something to do with President Eisenhower?
Sure does. This is a President Eisenhower tool.
Does he still get royalties on
I don't think so.
So for me, narrowing focus is always a function of time. So it depends on what I have in front of me, what the time fences be, what the time fence would be, and then I narrow my focus based upon how much time I have left or how much time I want to put into it. I'll stop there.
So that helps you define urgent and important. For you, a time factor would be part of your definition of urgent and important.
Yes.
Right. If you're working in healthcare and there's a new HIPAA law coming out, definitely important. Urgency will depend on how close the timeline is. And so time can be a factor in these definitions.
Thanks.
Sure.
So Jessica, I have a quick question. How do you handle all these manager types who delegate on a regular basis? Because what I heard you say is it's not urgent or important when they delegate. So how do you deal with that concept of delegation as something else than what you're talking about?
Yeah. So it might not be urgent and important for them, but it is still urgent and important for you. And this is where that conversation about what does urgency and importance look like at different levels for different roles, for example. So like as a project manager, the budget is often important. As a individual contributor inside a team, I'm probably that's not really in my focus. And so I don't focus on that. It's not urgent, important to me. So sometimes you have to have a negotiation. There has to be a conversation that says, this is urgent and important to me. Here's why, and get other people bought in to your reasons for urgency and importance. And if there are any managers in the room tonight, I highly recommend as a manager, you make that really clear. Buy-in will get your employees to decide to reprioritize their work without you having to ask them to.
That's awesome. Thank you, Jessica. I love this. Love this.
Okay. All right, let's jump into principle number 3. Pick the right time. So, did you know, actually, let me ask you this question. What time of day do doctors make more fatal errors?
They're tired.
What time of day do you think that is?
3 a.m.
Okay. All right,
3 p.m.
Okay.
Midnight.
Okay.
After lunch.
For lunch, between 2 p.m. and 4 p.m. Doctors make more fatal errors. Students bomb standardized tests. CEOs say stupid things on earning calls, which tank the stock. Between 2 and 4 p.m. The anesthesia errors are 4 times more likely at 3 p.m. than at 9 a.m. Colonoscopies have half as many polyps in the afternoon exams than in morning exams. Students who take math in the morning, better GPA and higher test scores than afternoon classes. And judges are more lenient in the morning and right after a break. So the time of day really matters. So here's the question for you. and we'll have a little test on it here in a minute. Here's a question for you. If you had no alarms or obligations, when would your midpoint of sleep be? So for example, if you go to bed at 9 p.m. and wake up at 6 a.m., your midpoint of sleep is 2 a.m. All right, and we're going to have our first survey. When is your midpoint of sleep? All right, for those of you in the 3 a.m. to 5 a.m. bucket, you are third birds. 65% of the world is considered a third bird. If you are in the midnight to 3 a.m. bucket, you are a lark. That's an early bird. And if you are in the 5 a.m. to noon bucket, you are a night owl. Larks are 14% of the world population. Third birds are 65% and owls are 21%.
I have a question.
Yeah.
So can those change? Like, let's say your work goes from like 12 to 8, then you can switch to night owl or something.
So the key here is that if you had no alarms or obligations, that's the real trick in this question. So like, think of yourself on vacation. When is your midpoint of sleep really? And the other thing to note is that over time, so like children are almost always larks. Teenagers, almost always night owls. It has to do with their hormonal cycles and where they are in their growth. Really much older folks, they tend to be larks as well. So it shifts a little bit depending on your age. But the real key to this question is no alarms or obligations. Okay. We can, of course, force ourselves into a pattern that doesn't match our natural tendencies. All right, so let's talk more about that. So this comes from the book When. I know that these times aren't perfectly aligned. I can't answer why without rereading the book. So just know, I know that that's there. So our larks and third birds, they live over here. You have a peak time between 9 and 11, and your trough is between 2 and 4. Please note the 2 and 4 is the trough for everybody. It's a bad time to make decisions. And then recovery time, it's 7 to 9 in the evening for larks and third birds. It's basically your second wind. Owls start in their second wind and they get their peak in the evening. Right. So analytical tasks are things like clear cut and dry logical answers, analyzing data, writing a report, going through strategy proposals. That's a good thing, good time for analytical tasks. Or that's what I mean by analytical tasks. Insight tasks are theoretical, visionary, creative. This is a good time for UX activities, brainstorming, discussion about the what ifs and the possibilities that live out there. Routine tasks are things like administrative stuff that's repeatable. So answering routine emails, making routine calls, spreadsheets, stuff you do all the time, stuff that you almost don't even have to think about anymore. That's the best time for routine tasks. Routine tasks typically are in the midday or trough zone. Okay. If you want to make an impression, because the majority of people receive you better in the mornings, you want to make your impression first thing in the morning. If you want to make a decision, because decisions are analytical tasks, better to play the odds and go for the morning or right after a break.
Just curious, have they anything in here about you had talked about natural states not having that, but most of us or the people that we work with are kind of forced into that time. How does that affect this?
Well, here's what I recommend to groups to teams when they're trying to make decisions for like, when do they want their stand-up, right? That kind of question. I ask everybody what their bird is. A stand-up is a pretty routine task, which means the best time for a stand-up is between 2 and 4 p.m. And that's pretty like bar none. Put your stand-up in the 2 to 4 p.m. block. If you have a team that's full of larks and early birds, it's real easy to figure out when the best time is for them to do work. Another thing you can do is set synchronous working hours and then let the rest of the time be asynchronous. So lots of organizations will be like 9 to 3 is synchronous working time. And you can work 6 to 3, you can work 9 to 6, or you work 9 to 3 and then like midnight to 2 if you want, whatever you want to do. So that's an idea that can help these teams. this is another thing where you could ask your teams, what is your peak time? What is your recovery time? And you could adjust the meeting schedules to accommodate those different thinking times. So if you have a mix of larks and owls, you probably don't want to have any meetings before 9 a.m. The owls will have a hard time being functional for them. They're at least in their recovery period still at the 9 a.m. mark. They're in their recovery zone still. So they are probably awake by 9, but the before 9 a.m. can be really tough for them.
Thank you.
So it's great feedback. So let me ask this question really quick. So I have teams, or I'm part of teams that are in different time zones, and by different time zones, not just US time. I have, team members that are in India and England. How do I manage this within the parameters of what you outlined for us in this exercise?
Well, I would say let the team decide. I think it's worthwhile to reflect this information to the team and then let the team figure out when is the best time for them to work. And if you've got any guardrails, like there has to be one person available between X hour and X hour, let them know what the guardrails are, and then let them pick how they organize themselves. One of the, it's really common as transition goes on that we are like, okay, let's try Scrum and Kanban and let the teams do what they want. And then we move to scaling and everybody standardizes. And then there's a whole movement about descaling, and descaling is delegating back down those decisions. One thing we're after is self-organizing teams. So give them the information and let them pick for themselves.
Well, that's a great response. I'm going to try that, see how that works.
Yeah.
Not used to doing that, letting go of control, but I think letting the team be self-organizing, which is one of the principles. I'll try it. Thank you.
Yeah. All right. Are you ready for principle number 4?
Yep.
Okay, here we go. Make a habit. All right, here's my question. It's coming up here in the next slide. In 1 to 3 words, what distracts you from getting things done? All right. So interruptions is our big winner. So let's talk a minute. Now, I just want to remind you all, I talked at Agile 2022 about setting boundaries. So we're about to dive into boundaries a little bit. If you go and read this book, Deep Work by Cal Newport, he talks about shallow work. So this is things like random emails, drive-by conversations, administrative work, social media, Slack, all that stuff you mentioned on that last slide. That's considered shallow work. Deep work is cognitively demanding. You will feel like you're in the zone. If you've ever done work and you surface up out of the work and you realize you've completely missed lunch, or you're deep in the work and suddenly hours have passed by, that's the zone we're talking about here. That is called the flow state. The name of number 4, Dennis, is make it a habit. So make a habit. So coding, writing, just like stuff you really are in. That is what we call deep work. All right. Some ways to make habits around deep work is to make it one of these 4 approaches. Though I will tell you that Cal Newport tells you not to try journalistic first. So you want to try these other 3 first before you dive into that one. It's a little bit, that one's a tough one to get into. So monastic means cut all the shallow work. Do nothing but deep work. Make a hard boundary. Don't answer Slack. Don't let people interrupt you. Seclude yourself away. That's monastic work. Bimodal, you focus on stretches. You get focused stretches of deep work. No smaller than 1 day per week. So 1 day a week, nothing is happening. No meetings, no interruptions, no Slack. You let everybody know, I'm shutting down all this communication. I'll get back to you tomorrow. Rhythmic is make a regular habit of deep work at the same time in a repeated cadence, kind of like Scrum. Right? So Scrum has, the intention of Scrum is you have your planning meeting, and then you have 15 minutes at the beginning of each day or the end of each day, if you want to do the 2 to 4 trough. And in between each of those 15-minute meetings, it's all deep work, no interruption. That doesn't actually happen in practice, but that's the idea. And then on the last day, you have your review and retrospective. And then journalistic is do it whenever possible. And that's why it's the last recommended one. Right? So that's the idea going on in that journalistic space. All right. What questions do I have about these 4 approaches?
Excuse me, are they sequential throughout the day? Are they ordered throughout the day, or is it throughout the week? What is the time frame for these behaviors or these habits?
You get to decide. So it's your time. You get to decide how to use it. So if you want to do monastic and you just like, let's say you've got to, I don't know, do some really creative writing for something. Maybe you're writing a blog for the company, or you're working on a book, or I don't know, whatever. You could just sequester yourself. And we hear about writers who do that. They go off to a cabin, they turn off their phones, and all they do is write. That's a monastic approach. And they write until the book is done. That may not work in your business world, but you could monastically turn everything off for a little bit, or on a cadence of your own. Bimodal, this is focused stretches. So we're going to talk about a model for bimodal. It's both bimodal and rhythmic, which is the Pomodoro technique. So we'll talk about that here in a little bit. But the idea there is that you have, for this amount of time, I'm not going to be disturbed, and you turn off all your notifications and you really dive in.
So I have a question about this too, Jessica. Have you ever overlaid this with the Eisenhower model, where you can show which types of work then are what you're putting in different categories? Is that something that you've seen work?
I haven't personally, but it sounds fascinating to try. Like, all of these tools and techniques I'm giving you, like, find the one that really interests you and just try it. The worst thing that happens is it doesn't work, and then you try something else. And I will also tell you that if you're neurodivergent in any way, you have ADHD, or you have, some sort of focusing problem, I am not a person that can speak to what you need. So I want to put that out there as well. So folks with focusing issues may struggle with some of these. Okay. All right. So create a ritual. Where will you work? Is it always the same place? So an example of a ritual I have, now that I'm working at home, I had to come up with some rituals to tell my brain I was in work mode, so that I would get less distracted by life going on outside my office. So I have 2 indirect lights on in my office. I turn them on and my brain's like, oh, we're at work today. Right. So those are some things you can do. I always work in the same location in my house unless I'm doing creative work. I find creative work works better for me if I'm like on my couch. And so that's where I do my creative work, and I do my all the other stuff here. So those are both things that are true for me. I find I work better with headphones on. That's how will I work? I put on noise canceling headphones so that I can close out all the sound that's around me. I hated open office spaces. They're very distracting. I'm an extrovert. I'd hear a conversation and I'm like, what's happening? I couldn't help myself. So the noise canceling headphones are really essential for my work, even in my own home. And then how will you support your work? Like, what do you need around you to make sure that happens? Do you need to tell people that you're going to be out of pocket so that you don't feel guilty? Do that. Do you need to have a ritual that you go through? Like, I'm going to sit down and have a cup of coffee on my front porch, and then I'm going to move into this space. Whatever your ritual is fine, but create a ritual for you that starts to signal to your brain that that's what you're about to do. Deep work is on us. We're doing that next.
So this puts me in, thank you for that. So this puts me in mind of what, I forget what it was called exactly, the 7 Habits of Highly Effective People way back in the day. One of the things for me is I'm collaborative. I need to on and off interact with people in order to, you know, focus and develop my the project that I'm working on. To fully develop it, I need to collaborate with folks. So how do I fit myself into one of these or any of these habits you just outlined or these disciplines you just outlined when I need to be collaborative as well?
Yeah, you can do deep work with other people. In technology, we call it pair programming. You can absolutely go deep with somebody. When you're working with somebody on the same thing, talking to them about that same thing is not context shifting. Context shifting is only when you're working on different things and you have to talk to somebody. So make a ritual with somebody. Establish what is it true for us when we're working together collaboratively on something, and create that system for yourselves.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm. Okay. All right, principle number 5, rest and recharge. I really like cats. Can you tell? All right. Yeah, cats, the rest and recharge. I mean, cats definitely have this down. Like mine are currently sleeping in the room, for example. I said context shifting, Sherry. Thanks for asking. All right, so burnout happens. Here's the thing to know. We are not meant to work full board constantly nonstop. We will in fact burn out for this cognitively rich work, knowledge work, which most of us are doing. During a workday, we only have about 3 to 4 hours of productivity and no more than 6 hours of productivity. In a 24-hour day, not in an 8-hour workday, in a 24-hour day, we will naturally reserve some hours for the evening because we know we're going to have cognitive work at home. Particularly if I'm cooking dinner, because cooking is not my specialty. If I'm cooking dinner, that is a cognitive load for me. So the idea here is that we have to really make sure we're not trying to run at our top push. When we work at our upper limit, we borrow time from our life outside of work. So if we're working 6, 8 really deep cognitive work hours, we go home, we want a glass of wine and we want bed, and that's it. We have no energy left for our lives, and our lives are important. If you're working just to work, as opposed to working to support your life, and then you don't use any of your life, then you're really giving away your life to work. So take regular breaks. Here is the Pomodoro technique I was talking about. This is another way to do rapid fire deep work. Decide on the task to be done. So we have that already. Narrow your focus. Set your timer for 25 minutes. Pomodoro means tomato in Italian, incidentally. Set the timer to 25 minutes. Work on the task focused until the timer rings. Take a short 5-minute break. Go feed the hummingbird. Walk to the kitchen and get your water refilled. Do a push-up or 2, whatever you want to do in 5 minutes. Then do it again 4 times. You're going to go through that cycle. At the end of the 4th cycle, take a 15 to 30-minute break. Walk the dog. Go do something that doesn't take your brain, which means you can't read because reading is cognitive work, right? So you've got to go do something that really gives you space. Go pet the cat for 15 minutes. You could also take what they call a nappuccino, which I'm going to talk about next. Right, so a nappuccino. Find your afternoon trough, 2 to 4. Create a peaceful environment. Down a cup of coffee or an equivalent amount of caffeine. So tea, coffee, soda, whatever your thing is. Set a time for 25 minutes. Go to sleep. Go to sleep. Set a timer for 25 minutes. When you wake up, the caffeine will have hit your system and it will boost you through your trough. This is called a nappuccino. Okay.
Do you have any insight into some of the Asian work days? Like I had heard that Japan works, you know, the way we talk about it is Monday through Friday, 9 to 5. I had heard that they work Sunday to like some crazy amount of time, right? 9 to 9. I mean,
Yeah.
just to,
Yeah.
and
I was
so how,
thinking about that too.
Yeah, so let me tell you some interesting information out of Japan. I worked for a company in Japan. I was doing some coaching over there, and they do work 60, 70, 80-hour weeks. It's insane. They actually plan for people to take a rest sabbatical. It's in their project plans. They know people are going to burn out, and they're going to take like a month to 3 months off because they can't go anymore. Right? If they keep going, that is why you always hear in the news about Japanese people committing suicide because they're stressed, right? That's another potential outcome of burnout. And Microsoft, I want to say it was Microsoft. Microsoft did an experiment in Japan, and I don't know if they kept it, but they did an experiment in Japan, and they brought everybody in their Japanese offices down to 4 days a week of 8-hour days. Only 4 days a week. And they saw an increase in productivity. Rest is really important to productivity. If you're a gamer and you overclock your computer, the computer burns up. This brain is your computer. And if you keep running it at high rates, you're gonna burn it out. And high levels of stress can lead to heart disease, heart attack, bad eating habits, bad exercise habits, which impact your health, bad mental health, like all manner of bad impacts from not taking the rest and recharge. It's incredibly important to the functioning of yourself and incredibly important to the functioning of a company, actually. That they will see better results if they do it. Not to mention that employee engagement usually goes up. And when employee engagement goes up, productivity, predictability, sales, revenue, stock prices all go up.
So I had something to add.
Yeah.
So I worked in the Middle East, and they had this practice that around lunch, they would go home and take a nap, have their lunch, take a nap, and come back and work till 8 late in the evening. And I believe this is true even in Europe, some parts of Italy, and I believe it's good for your health to take a nap after lunch.
Yep. Nappuccinos in your trough right after lunch. So it is absolutely the best time. I teach classes a lot, and I tend to teach them between 11 and 3:30 Central Time, 12 and 4:30 Eastern Time. And that means right in the middle of the class, everybody's hitting their trough. And so I often encourage people to get up and move to get their blood moving again, and get their brain back online. Tyler, that was an aptly timed yawn. Here are some other ways that you can recharge. Right, sunshine's really helpful. I have a vitamin D deficiency, and my body just doesn't hold on to it like it's supposed to. And I take a vitamin D pill every morning, and my husband calls it my sunshine, my happy little sunshine pill. Vitamin D does a lot to lift us up, and we make vitamin D when we're in the sun. So highly recommend, get a little sunshine. All right.
Real quick. I don't take this into a deep dive and a psychological profiling situation here, but worry has an effect, certainly on me. Stress and worry are different.
Yeah.
And sometimes the worry are things that I cannot control. Stress, I can do something about based upon these very good tools you've outlined, but the worry part, the things beyond my control that will impact my performance. What do we do about that?
All right, I'm going to say this a little tongue in cheek, but I mean it seriously. Go to
Okay.
therapy. Go to therapy. Therapy is how we heal those things. There can also be good stress. Like, things could be great at the office, but that excitement also adds stress to your body. So, if what you're finding is an obsessive worrying that's happening in your brain, go talk to a mental health therapist to work through why that's happening and how to stop, or what coping mechanisms they can offer. If I were to dive into that, I would start trying to be therapizing it, and I'm not a therapist. I'm not trained to do that. So that's my recommendation.
Yeah, I had something to add about your vitamin D.
Yeah.
If you take calcium, your absorption of vitamin D is a lot better.
I'm on it. I have gone to a doctor for those things. So that is also happening. All right. Okay, so here's my next question to you. What can you do during a break to recharge? I'm seeing walk pop up here, so I'm going to recommend, even if it's raining, grab an umbrella, grab some waterproof shoes, and go play in the rain. A couple of other ideas. My husband is a juggler, so you could juggle, play with a yo-yo, do something kinesthetic that isn't walking if your body isn't able to do that. I see in the chat, praise sing dance. I love singing. That's super fun. If you've ever been to a silent disco, I highly recommend it if you haven't done it before. Silent discos, you get Bluetooth headphones, and everybody in the headphones can hear the song and they're dancing to it on the disco floor, but everybody outside cannot hear it. So they just look like they're crazy. It's super fun.
I was going to add, like, taking a walk is like a really good idea, because I remember reading a study, like, supposedly if you work in a classroom or in a team in a room, oxygen gets depleted by like 60 to 80%, and your brain needs fresh oxygen to like think correctly. So taking a walk, going outside helps that. And also, if you want, you can put snake plants, because it turns carbon into oxygen for you.
There you go.
Very good investments.
Great. Okay. All right. Principle number 6, say no. All right. We are conditioned in the United States, at least, and in many other places, that we're not supposed to say no, that we're always supposed to say yes. That is how our backlogs become thousands of user stories deep. No is important. I really like this poem, so I'm going to read it to you. So no is a necessary magic. No draws a circle around you with chalk and says, I have given enough. This is important. When we say no, we build trust. If I say yes and then don't deliver, what I do is actually break trust. People were expecting me to do something in a certain amount of time, and now I'm not. You're essentially, here's what you're getting out of it. You're setting clear expectations. That does trust. You're protecting what is most valuable. The thing that was most urgent and most important gets protected because you've said no. And we get our commitments done, which feels good. And if we focused, we get them done faster. So here's some techniques, some phrasing that you can use to say no kindly. Given the deadline you provided and my other priorities, I won't be able to achieve your request. I think this is a great idea. However, it doesn't fit with any of our prioritized work right now. How about we pitch it up to the portfolio for prioritization? If I work on this, then I sacrifice work on this other valuable thing. Would you please help me determine which takes precedence? I can't focus on this right now. How about we discuss it after my next break in 30 minutes? Okay, so those are some nice, clean ways to say no that aren't quite as jarring as saying no. So those are some things to consider. Do not use words like just, maybe, I think. They soften your no, and we actually need your no to be firm and kind. Okay, well, here's all 6 principles again, in case you'd forgotten or didn't catch one. These are the 6 principles we're working from. Are there any other questions or thoughts?
Yeah, Jessica, I would say that, oh, I'm sorry, Scott, go ahead.
No, go right ahead. Go right ahead.
I was going to say that I think the no is probably easier if you've done some of other exercises you gave us, because if I have my Eisenhower or I have my types of work now, if I've done everything you asked, you mentioned before, then the no is so much easier to deliver. You say, well, according to my Eisenhower matrix, right? I think you've given us a lot of really good supporting documentation or ways to have that no conversation that's really hard to do when the person who writes your review is the one you're trying to tell no.
Yeah. And really, another way, if they've given you, like, they gave you a thing yesterday, they're giving you a thing today, and you know they're going to give you a thing tomorrow. Every time they come, you can say, yesterday you asked me to be working on this thing. If I switch my focus to this thing, that thing's not getting done. What do you want me to do first? And then ask them, why is that the first thing? And start getting them to articulate urgency and importance. It can help tremendously in the long run.
Basically give them the choices which are acceptable to you, right?
Mhm. Yeah.
It reminded me that that episode from Big Bang Theory. They give Sheldon two choices which is acceptable to Leonard and Penny. I don't know if anybody Big Bang Theory fans.
This also works with children. Like if you want them to dress themselves, you give them a choice of 3 outfits.
It's funny you said that. They picked it up from the children's book and gave it to them. So.
Yeah. Yeah. Scott, did you have a question?
No, it's more of an observation. I tend to add a bunch of things to my calendars of things that I think will be good or good causes to take part in, and not realizing that I might spread myself too thin sometimes.
Yeah, I have a lot of friends with like both social anxiety, and they get worn out. They like run out of energy for peopling. And so a useful thing to do when you're committing to an event is to say, I'm excited about that idea right now. I'd like to reserve the right to commit until it gets closer. That can be a really nice way to say, that sounds great, but I might not have the energy for it when the time comes. Another thing I heard somebody, one of my friends communicate, you can come if you want, doesn't sound inviting. Another way to say that is, I want you to come if you have the energy for it. And that indicates your interest in having them present, but also gives them a way to say, I can't do this today. All right, well, here's how to find me if you're interested. I'm pretty frequently posting things on LinkedIn, and often that includes other places I'm speaking. So feel free to catch me there. And if you want to chat more about this, I'm also happy to do that offline.
This has been extraordinarily helpful. Thank you so much for these insights. Very much.
Hey, Jessica, this is Pepe. I just wanted to say thank you again for joining us at Agile New England. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, I'm happy to be here. It's always a fun and very warm and welcoming group. So thank you for that.
Excellent.
So Jessica, I'm going to ask a weird question about what you're talking about, how does it relate between work and home life balance?
You have 3 to 4 productive hours in a 24-hour period. Your max is 6. So the work-life balance becomes things like, hey boss, I am in the middle of, my mother has COVID, my child starts school next week. I woke up with a migraine today, and all of my energy is going to that. I need low cognitive work today. And you just tell them that. That's another way to set boundaries. You just tell them that. Sounds really easy coming out of my mouth. I realized that was pretty pithy. So I know that can be harder than said than done, or easier said than done, harder done than said. And the idea here is that you want to talk to the people you work with in advance of the need for work-life balance about what they want work-life balance to look like. So negotiating work-life balance is important. When you work on a team, the idea of being on a team is that if somebody has low energy that week, somebody else can pick up the slack. That's why we talk about cross-functionality, where more people than one has a specific skill set. So another thing you can do is set that working agreement in advance. Also with your bosses, that doesn't have to just be on your team. You can talk to your manager and say, hey, this is what work-life balance looks like to me. Best place I ever worked had unlimited PTO and meant it. And if I needed time off to handle a thing, I just took it.
So that's one end of the spectrum, but I'm looking at the grid that you put up, and I'm thinking that a high priority, very important thing might be happening at the workplace. At the same time, you have a high priority and really important thing happening at home.
Yeah.
And they're both equally important. They both have the same deadline. What do you do?
If I have a high priority important thing happening at home, for me, my family always comes first, and the work thing will never be my highest priority until I get a bonus equal to the CEO's. So the conversation I would have with the office would be, I've got this thing I have to focus on today. Is there somebody who could pitch it for me and take on this very important, urgent thing at work?
That is an awesome answer. That's a great way to look at it.
Okay.
Jessica?
Yeah.
Hi, I have a cute little anecdote from the past that I just wanted to share. It was bring your daughter to work day, and my boss brought his two little daughters to work. And so they thought they had to do work things. And they were in the office there, and I overheard their conversation. One was playing the boss, and the other one was playing the employee. And the boss daughter said to the employee daughter, well, I want you to do this, and you're going to do this, and you're going to do that, and you have to do this, she said. And whatever you don't finish today, well, you can just do it tomorrow.
Nice.
That was cute.
That's great.
All right. Any more questions for Jessica? Jessica, where are you speaking next? Do you have another engagement lined up that we should all love and know about so we can attend?
Just posted about one this week. Give me a minute. I will tell you.
No problem.
Here it is. The Z Hill, TJ Adadayo, I think I'm saying his last name right, invited me to a virtual event, and we're going to have a conversational discussion about Agile. So that is the next place. I will put the registration information in chat.
That would be awesome. And I definitely think you should come back and talk to us about that journaling technique that you mentioned, because I think that would be very helpful to just be a part 2 of what you just shared with us. So you definitely have to come back and talk to us about that, because I want to geek out about that for sure.
Happy to.
Awesome. Any other questions for Jessica? She can hang out with us for a little bit. You have all her contact information. She can post it again. We'll make sure that you get recordings and all that fun stuff. But I want to give you a chance. We still have a little bit of time, but we can end early if there's no further questions from the audience tonight.
Also, a reminder, everybody, to save off the chat. If you'd like to save the chat now, you can. There's a little breadcrumbs in the chat window usually, and you can choose save chat to save off the text that everyone's been contributing to.
Thanks, Maggie, for that reminder. I appreciate that. All right, well, let's give Jessica a warm round of applause. She said some nice things about Agile New England, and we appreciate her always coming back to talk to us. Thank you so much, Jessica, for sharing tonight.
Happy to do it.
Thank you.